There we go. Right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight for this very special live stream. I'm joined with a couple of special guests today. So I've got Moa, Swedish whiskey girl, say hello.
Hello.
And I've also got Will joining us from Bladnoch Distillery. And big thanks to Will as well, because it is very early in the morning where he is. Do you want to actually let everyone know what time of the morning I've dragged you out of bed for this?
Yeah, it's just gone 6 o'clock in the morning here in Australia. So very, very early start to the day. Good start with whiskey though. So it's worst way to kick off your Tuesday.
Yep, very gallant of you. Thank you. Right, so what's going on tonight? So we're going to be talking about the newest release of Bladnoch. Both myself and Moa have had a chance to get to know this individually. And I'm quite keen for us to kind of come together and talk about this, because one thing that I've noticed from both of our takes on this is that we had quite different things to say about it, which was really interesting to me. So I'm keen to kind of see what our differences in tasting notes are, and if we can come to a consensus, or failing that, we'll have a fight. It's fine. So
I'll be the judge.
It'd be kind of like a Harry Hill sort of a thing, yeah.
Stripy shirt, you know.
Aye. And also, there is going to be some details about a giveaway at the end of the stream, so make sure to stick around for details for that. So we'll open up just kind of saying kind of who we all are, because I understand because of sort of the nature of this, some people might have jumped on for the first time and be like, oh, right, cool, we'll get to learn a bit about Bladnoch. It might be the case that some people watching this haven't got a clue who any of us are, which is fine by me, because I like talking about myself. I don't know how everyone else, but so I'll kick off. My name's John. I am an assistant manager at a bar in Edinburgh. I quite like whiskey and other spirits, and I like talking about themselves. Well, there was a slip of the tongue there, wasn't there? I like talking about myself, and I like talking about spirits as well. For me, one of the whiskies that got me started was Balvenie 12. Sorry, Will. It was one of the first ones that I jumped into where I wasn't kind of like, so that was my first one where I was like, oh, I can maybe get into this. Yeah, okay. And since then, it's kind of spiraled out of control a little bit, as we'll see tonight, I suppose. Mo, do you want to let the guys and gals at home know who you are, what you do?
Of course. Well, I am Moa. I'm also known as the Swedish whiskey girl, which kind of explains who I am and what I do. I am Swedish. I like whiskey, and I'm a girl. So I moved to Edinburgh about 5 years ago, because that's where I currently live, to be a professional dancer. But whiskey kind of led me astray. So I started trying some samples after I've done a wine course, because I'm always quite fascinated about flavor. It doesn't matter if it's cooking or baking or drinking spirits. And then it was a very smoky, powerful dram of Ardbeg 10 that got me hooked. And since then, started documenting my whiskey journey on social media. And now that's what I do a lot of the time. And I also love talking a lot. So yeah, that's kind of my whiskey journey to where I am right
now. Great. So my name's Will. I'm the head of commercial for Bladnoch Distillery. I guess I started my journey a long time ago. I started working in bars and was a bartender, and then also working in hotels in Australia, and then switched over and I started working for Pernod Ricard. So I worked for a company that owns brands like Upper and Glenlivet and Chivas Regal, which I guess probably is my first sort of real experience with whiskey, and it is some would say a humble blend. It was probably Chivas Regal. It was a pouring whiskey at the first bar I worked at, and I guess was the first sort of baby step into the world of Scotch whiskey. I worked for Pernod Ricard in Paris for a few years, and joined Bladnoch nearly 4 years ago. The team based here in Australia, but because of the magic of technology, we really work quite globally. So even though we're on the other side of the world, all the sales, marketing, and finance is run out of Australia, with all the operations and logistics, of course, run out of the distillery in Scotland. And normally I'm traveling a lot, and like all of us, now I'm not. Fortunately, there's worse places to be stuck than here in Australia. We're having a relatively easy time of it with for the last 12 months. But that being said, I'm itching to get back on a plane and get to Scotland and go back and see everybody. But I'll wait till you guys are properly inoculated before I risk stepping foot back in Scotland. So.
Fair enough. Right. So thank you both for joining me tonight. I did also want to quickly mention as well, to everybody who's in the audience, thank you very much for joining us. And if anyone's catching us on the catch up, then thank you very much as well. There will be an option as well to submit questions as we're going along. If there's anything that you want to ask, let us know, and we will try and cover those at the end of the stream. So I've got sort of conspicuously spinning behind me the bottle that we're going to be talking about tonight. So I'm actually going to reach and grab that. So this is the Bladnoch Vinaya. I just want to make sure that the cork was on, because that is the last thing I want to do online, is pour it all over the desk. I'm like, no, the precious liquid. It's a beautiful bottle, as with a lot of the Bladnochs. I've said quite often that these things can double as a deadly weapon. I don't know if you maybe appreciate me saying that, but I mean, they're chunky, hefty boys, these bottles.
They're brilliant for home workouts, just in case anyone
yeah, a bit of bicep work, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I'm growing my guns.
I'll tell my wife that's what I'm doing when I'm drinking whiskey. It's just all about a bit of exercise.
Exactly.
Constant lifting, yeah. I think that says a lot about the difference in people that we are. I'm kind of like, yeah, this is a good bludgeoning device, and you're kind of like, oh, fitness. It's like, if there's a difference in personalities that we needed to know, now we know it. So, Will, I suppose over to you a little bit. Could you tell us a little bit about kind of like Bladnoch, a little bit of the history of the distillery, what's happening going forward with it as well? Because I mean, I've done a bit of research.
Sure.
I know that it's over 200 years old, so it's not new on the market. But I think a lot of people are kind of like rediscovering it recently, so they might be a little bit surprised to find it's been going for a while.
Yeah. So look, I mean, you're right that it's got sort of over 200 years of history as a distillery, but it certainly hasn't been a history that's without its fair share of challenges. As most people who know a little of Bladnoch know that, especially the last sort of 30 or 40 years, it's been a pretty tough time for Bladnoch. But you know, the future is looking a lot brighter now. So 200 years ago, it was founded by a couple of brothers, McClelland brothers. And you can still see the McClelland's name. There's a bottler in Glasgow called McClelland, and you can sometimes see bottles of blended whiskey called McClelland's that's available in some markets. But this family owned the distillery for a good part of a century, from when it was founded, 1817, and then kind of early 20th century started a period of lots and lots of changing of hands. So the stills were actually dismantled and sent over to Sweden, in fact, to make whiskey. Not to make whiskey, to make distilled spirits, as say, sort of pre or sort of just around the time of the First World War. New stills were put in. There was triple, there was double distillation. There were large stills, small stills. There were a number of smaller owners that had the distillery. Larger ones in the back half of the 20th century. Inverhouse had it for a while. A lot of the Bladnoch was being made to put into Bell's blended whiskey. And then, in the early 1980s, it was United Distillers and Vintners that took over. And United Distillers and Vintners, of course, was one of the companies that got rolled up in the creation of Diageo in the mid-90s, along with Guinness PLC and Grand Metropolitan. And so United Distillers and Vintners owned a number of course, well-known distilleries, some of which didn't last the distance. And of course, there are more than a few people that mourn some of the great distilleries that were closed in the early 90s when United kind of offloaded them or shut them down so they could focus on their big money makers that became part of Diageo, the Daliscas and the Dalwhinnies of the world. And so in the early 90s, Diageo put this distillery up for sale, really with the intention of having it closed down and not making any whiskey. And it was bought by a couple of Northern Irishmen who bought the distillery with the intention to turn it into basically a sort of a holiday park or a visitor's attraction where you could sleep overnight in a distillery. And it's a very beautiful part of Scotland, right down there in the Lowland. It's the southernmost Scotch whisky distillery, and it's in an area that doesn't have, as you know, a lot of distilleries in the region. Well, of course, that is changing. There are a lot more great new distilleries opening up, or even great old names coming back, Annandale and Rosebank and so forth. And so they bought it in 1993 or 1994. They started it as a sort of a holiday park, and very quickly, one of the brothers especially thought, well, we've got this distillery with so much rich history, and lovers of whiskey, and so they fought to change the terms so that they could still produce whiskey. And it took them a few years to get that organised. And so in 2000, they started distilling whiskey again. Not very much, and only very, very small stills. They had their theoretical maximum of 100,000 litres of alcohol a year of production, but they never even came close to that level of production in that time. And so production continued sort of sporadically from 2000 through to 2009. And then basically there was a bit of an internal family dispute, and they couldn't move forward. And so stopped making whiskey and instead just bottled and sold it. So for a number of years, the only Bladnoch you would have seen would have been in a bottle with a sheep or a cow on the label. It had lots of special editions. I've got a Wedding of Prince William edition Bladnoch, so with a kind of a homemade label with a picture of William. I'm not entirely sure that was a licensed product, but anyway, it was capitalizing on the royal wedding, and there was lots of very small editions that came out. They released a peated new make, an unpeated new make, 8-year-old and 11. I think it was an 18. There were lots of very, very small batches, and then finally in 2014. The internal dispute between the brothers meant that it really wasn't tenable to keep the business going, and so they put it up on the market. And David Pryor, the current owner of Bladnoch, he bought it in a very competitive tender process. Distilleries don't sell very often, really. Working Scotch distilleries, maybe once a year, one changes hands. You compare it to the world of M&A and many other industries, and there's lots of movement. But in Scotch whisky, really it's, you think about, last year or late 2019, it was Glen Turret, of course, being sold, and of course rebranded. Before that, 2017 was probably the big transaction with Benriach and Glen Glassware and so forth that were sold to Benriach company. There really aren't a lot of distilleries changing hands. So David initially wanted to build a brand new distillery and actually already pegged out some land in the Highlands and was going to build a distillery from scratch, like so many great new companies coming out now, whether it's Arran or down in the Lowlands with us, you've got Daft Mill and so forth to create a whiskey and a name and a brand from zero. But of course that's got its own challenges. The biggest one of which is that you can't really make any money for the first 3 years because you've got nothing to sell. But when the opportunity to buy Bladnoch came about, he just jumped on it. So obviously, the distillery couldn't make any whiskey then. It wasn't in a condition. Everything hadn't been operating for 6 years, and so it took a few years to kind of get everything back and recommissioned. And we didn't start actually distilling whiskey until 2017, sort of about middle of 2017. In the meantime, however, what we did get with the distillery were a moderate, but certainly by no means a large collection of barrels distilled by the previous owners. And so those are the whiskies that we've been releasing. Every single drop of Bladnoch that's been released now has been barrels that we've purchased right up until Vinaya. So for example, we've got I brought some props. So our 14-year-old, for example, this 14-year-old, every single drop here is from the previous owners who've essentially selected the initial cask maturation. Now, some of our whiskies, of course, we've re-racked into new casks. We did a lot with red wine, as those of you who are Bladnoch fans would already know. We do a non-age statement red wine called Samsara. We've even done a 26-year-old red wine cask finish. But really, what makes, I guess, this so momentous is that this is now moving into a phase where there's starting to be whiskies blended in from the new phase of Bladnoch's journey. And it really is the first step of a whole lot of new whiskies that we've really had a hand in from start to finish, as opposed to inheriting the whiskies of the past. And I guess that's part of the reason that we chose the Vinaya name, is that it is absolutely taking the teachings of the previous generations of whiskey makers and incorporating them with the things that we've added to the distillery, coming up with a whiskey that really is representative of that journey. So yeah, that brings us to today.
I actually had a question for you there, Will. I got a question from one of my patrons called Jamie, and he was asking if there's anything significant that has been changed from the last owners to now, the way you do production or maturation or kind of the focus of it, that we might see moving forwards over the next 10 or so years.
Look, brand new stills. So the old owners the stills were unfortunately not able to be rescued. We built new stills much larger. We have a capacity of 1.5 million litres of alcohol a year, and we are working at 100% capacity. So one of the big things, I guess, when we took it over is we got what we got, right? A few thousand casks, you can't go back in time and say, oh gosh, I wish you'd laid down more sherry casks, because that's really popular in 2021. So instead, the approach now is to lay down as much and to really build a strong basis of stocks, because not to trolley out a cliche, but great whiskey makers make whiskey which they're never going to actually drink, and that's really is the approach of Bladnoch, is that the whiskey we're making today, really we're selling in volume. I'm probably not going to work at Bladnoch. Nick Savage, our master distiller, he probably won't be here, and maybe David won't even be the owner. So you've really got to be quite forward thinking and laying the whiskey down. So you put ourselves in the shoes of the team back in the early 2000s that were making whiskey, really small parcels of whiskey, and go, if we could go back in time, what would we want today? And that's the approach that we take for the future, and hence us laying down a really significant stock, so that in the future we do have peated, sherry cask, little quarter cask, large puncheons. Primarily we're doing first fills. We don't do a lot of second fill at Bladnoch, but lots of first fill bourbon. It really is a great canvas which you can paint some wonderful finishes on. We're sourcing casks from all sorts of interesting places. I think we'll talk about that later. I've seen some of your questions on your last review, Moa. But the idea is of course, is building out those options for the future, because as I say, once the time has elapsed, you can't go back in time. So instead, we want to really be quite forward thinking, and that's something that, versus the previous owners, they didn't have the opportunity to do. I'm sure that if they could, they would have loved to have distilled 45 weeks a year. Instead, they were distilling 3 or 4 weeks a year. So with that in mind, Bladnoch's only going to grow and be stronger if future generations in my job that are promoting and selling whiskey around the world have got the stock to do it. And again, Vinaya is really the first example there. It's our first non-limited edition. And you'll actually notice on the bottle there, John, I don't know if you've got your 10-year-old or your 11-year-old at hand, but the new releases, say 2020 release or 2021 release, we used to put limited release on some of the bottles, and that's again reflective of the fact that they really were limited. But we've changed the text for Vinaya, and it's now called Classic Collection, because these are one of the foundational whiskies, and they're not limited release. We will keep on making this, as long as people like. I mean, it's within reason, of course. I mean, we're never going to be selling the volume that Glenlivet or so forth is going to be producing, but everything's had to be limited so far. And one of the things, and it's a bit of a bugbear of John's, that I always comment. So I'm always writing the comments on YouTube. So the people who have made comments about us getting involved in the YouTube comments, that's me. I'm on a one-man mission to make YouTube comments not the toxic cesspool that they usually are. And actually, on most whiskey channels, they're pretty good, especially on I don't know if we're allowed to mention Ralphie, that'll be censored in the live stream, but he's been a great fan of some of our whiskeys. I think I'm always commenting.
That's nice to see, though. Yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh, I wonder if this will. And I saw it's just lovely to hear about Bladnoch's approach, and I think that's why a lot of people are so interested in it. I often get so many comments like, oh, you have to try Bladnoch. I was like, yes, I know, I need to try it soon. And I think also in your response, you also answered another question that we had from, who was that? Andrew, who was asking if Bladnoch will produce other style of spirits, so peated, for example.
Yeah, so we currently produce peated spirit for 4 weeks a year. And we have a first cask, a single cask product. So we do a series called Select Cask. Here's one here that we did for a wonderful bar here in Melbourne called Boilermaker House. And this is a 19-year-old Moscatel finished cask. Absolutely beautiful cask from 2000. This is only available in Australia, and it's primarily available at Boilermaker House Bar in Melbourne. So we do collaborations of single casks with bars, mostly bars that we like going to. So they are big fans of ours. And we've just had a release actually that's come out in the last week, which is our first peated single cask that was done in collaboration with some of our top fans, because one of the things, you know, you mentioned about how engagement with the community, it's really, really important for us, not just because, of course, you know, these days you can't physically hold, you know, whiskey shows or whiskey tastings, but we're really, really big on directly engaging with our consumers. One of the things that I found when I was at Pernod Ricard is that, you know, I was in the head office in Paris, and you're so far away from the consumer, and there's layers and layers of red tape and bureaucracy, and you know, you'd have a great idea, and by the time it had gone through the different layers and every person had hooked their wagon up to it, the idea had just collapsed because, you know, really there was just no ability to come up with something new. Whereas at Bladnoch, you know, usually by breakfast we'll have an idea, and at 5 o'clock it's almost on the shelf. So what that means is that we need to be really connected to our consumers, and so we created a select cask that came about over a dram with the team about how can we get our consumers involved in selecting a whiskey. So we sent out 3 samples to 50 fans who sort of signed up for this tasting, held a live tasting with Nick Savage, tasted the 3 different casks, and everyone voted. It was very democratic. It was around the time of the November election, so I thought, how can we have a more democratic process than the US? And let's get people voting on their favourite Bladnoch. It's something that everyone can agree on. And they voted for the cask that they wanted bottled as the next version of this select cask. And the one they chose was a peated whiskey. And so that'll be the first peated whiskey produced by Bladnoch in about a decade. I can see someone in the comments said that they tried the old peated whiskey with the old label. So this will be the first one, but it's certainly not going to be the last. It is unfortunately only 200 bottles. That's very limited. You'll only be able to get it when you visit us at our visitor centre at Bladnoch. So you're unlikely to be able to grab a bottle of that one. But as I say, so far the reaction's been very positive. A lot of people have asked us about it, and we are producing 1 month a year peated, so you will be able to try some of that. We've got a few more things up our sleeve that it might be early in the morning, but I've still got enough of my wits about me to not reveal our upcoming release.
Okay, so we can't ask you too much about any upcoming secrets that are coming up, because obviously they are upcoming and also secret. I want some insider information. God damn it! That was the whole point. Yeah, so that's really exciting actually, because it was something that I was curious about myself, being quite a fan of peated whiskies myself, not just necessarily, you know, complete smoke bombs, but, you know, more on the delicate side of peated whiskies as well. I was curious to see if those two worlds would ever collide. So it's nice to see, both for myself and obviously the people that have been commenting tonight, that that is actually going to be going forward. I'm going to quickly run through some comments, because we've actually had some running through, and I don't want the audience to feel like I'm just completely ignoring them. So I'm just going to quickly cycle through some of the hellos that we've been getting as well.
So nice to see that people are watching.
It really is, yeah. Vic was actually asking, is there going to be a biscuit portion of the stream? Which, whilst I know that's a joke, I was tempted to be like, I'm going to do a little pairing with like custard, but I thought, you know what, no, let's not make this too busy. But I was close to doing that, I'm not going to lie. Good evening, everybody. I've actually got a question coming from Keith, which he submitted earlier on, so I'll need to go and get that for the Q&A later on. But that's the good question that I was telling you about earlier on. We've got Vin joining us as well. Lovely to see. Asked his question on peated whiskies already. Drastically understood it on Bladnoch. Where is the best place to start? Ooh. Does anybody want to field this now? Actually, things we're getting through.
Well, I was curious to find out, John, where you kind of started with Bladnoch. I mean, that would be interesting to hear.
Well, with myself, it was the 10-year-old, and obviously, I'm not censoring Ralphie out of this, because A, it's Ralphie, how dare you, and B, it's difficult to have a conversation about Bladnoch for a lot of people, I think, without mentioning Ralphie, because he's been such, I think it's safe to say, a friend of the distillery, both past and present. And that was sort of where I'd first really heard. I mean, I'd heard of Bladnoch before that, and I was like, okay. But that was the first one where I was kind of like, okay, right, I'll give that a go. And through a bit of luck, I'd found a bottle of the 10-year-old it was the Royal Mile Whiskies. Actually, they had a bottle, so I was like, I'll give it a go. It's there. Really connected with it. Ended up in Cadenheads looking for something else a few months later, and they had a bottle, and it was, I think they were having a deal on it or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I'll buy another one of those for that. Yeah, sure, go, absolutely. And they were like, oh, it's a Lowland whiskey. And I was like, yeah, no, it's great. Gimme. So the 10 was kind of like my first exposure to Bladnoch, and I'd say it's done a lot. It's done a lot to kind of like, you know, show what the distillery is capable of. Going on from that, also I've tried the 11, I've tried the Vinaya. I'm talking actually a little bit about kind of like, you know, sort of the checkered history of Bladnoch as well. I did get my hands on a miniature of, it was back when it was under Diageo's stewardship. I think it was an 8-year-old Bladnoch. Kind of looked like an old Wild West logo type deal. It wasn't great because it was weird. Because I was like, oh, I'm really excited to try like this vintage one because of the bar that I work in. It's got quite a heavy vintage whiskey collection, and it's kind of like, you know, opened my mind up to kind of like, oh, trying whiskey from yesteryear. And I was like, that was the first one that I tried where like the modern iteration is running rings around the old stuff. So I was like, that's fascinating, but also really good to see. That, you know, it's not always kind of like, oh, things used to be better in the olden days. It's like, well, Bladnoch's knocking out the park better now than it was then. And I'm not just saying that because I've got you there, you know, because I think we all know I'm a bit of a Burke sometimes, so, you know, I speak my mind. But yeah, so that was kind of like my journey with Bladnoch so far. What about yours, Moa, actually? Because obviously you've said that a lot of people were kind of like talking to you about, you know, you need to try Bladnoch.
Yeah, no, so I think because I worked for the Scottish Whisky Experience, where they have tours, and then on the tour you get to choose, if you're on the standard tour, you get to choose one whiskey from one of the regions. And because there's quite a limited choice in the Lowlands, there was specifically one distillery that was always a choice, or one or two. But then Bladnoch kind of came into the shop, and that was always fascinating because you're always keen to try new whiskies, and especially I'm a bit of a sucker for a nice bottle design, and immediately I thought this is stunning. And then we were at a whiskey fair, actually, when I got to try a few, it was 3 expressions next to each other, and the 10 just was everything I like in a whiskey. It has such a full body that I don't find in a lot of other whiskies. And then it also had this kind of explosion of tropical fruits, which I absolutely love. So that was definitely an eye-opener. And after that is kind of when I've seen a lot more people mention it. So it's been fascinating to kind of see how it's gone from being a little bit unknown to me, and then at the same rate as I'm exploring it, I also get a lot of comments about it. So it seems like there's not just me discovering it in this pace, there's other people as well. So yeah, I'm very fascinated about the distillery going forward. So I'd love to go to the distillery when it's possible again. I just want to go out and see distilleries again.
Well, you'll be very welcome there, but it's at the moment, and you know, I can be very tentative with this. And if you're watching this in the future, you'll be laughing, going, "Oh, I remember those times when we couldn't go to distilleries." But at the moment, it's looking like mid-May for kind of full reopening, and possibly early May for the shop to reopen as well. So, you know, you don't want to jinx it and kind of guarantee that any particular date. But yeah, it's looking like mid-May to reopen, which, well, it's still a while away. It's still 6 weeks away. It's better than, you know, the kind of not knowing, you know, when we're going to be able to head back out there. So definitely looking forward. And I'm talking kind of every few days with the team, and we're planning plenty of exciting things to really, you know, capture the fact that a lot of people will be holidaying, you know, in Scotland that maybe would have taken their vacation overseas, and they're going to be hopefully heading to some of the great, you know, local attractions in the UK and such as distilleries in Scotland. So should be a pretty busy year. Fingers crossed everything goes well and everyone can come in. We can go and have a dram at the distillery, although I'm not sure when our government will let us leave Australia. So.
Yeah, definitely. Fingers crossed. Because some distilleries I've heard from, they are not planning to open before next year. So anything that's before December, I'll be super excited to see. So all the fingers crossed.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny enough, you asked about the first Bladnoch. So I think, like a lot of people, I'd not tried Bladnoch in my sort of general whiskey journey. Exporting wise, you know, Bladnoch really was only exported a little bit to Germany, a little to Italy, a little to Spain, and other than that, really it was just the UK. And every other Bladnoch people have generally tried are independent bottling. And something else interesting, again, that I'm happy to give you lots of exclusive scoops because you've been kind enough to invite me on this morning, is Bladnoch stopped selling casks to third parties when they sold out in 1993. So generally, if you're seeing an independent bottling of Bladnoch now, whether it's Scotch Malt Whisky Society or Cadenheads or Gordon MacPhail, it's 27, 28, 29 years old, because 1993 is the youngest whiskey that they have. And so they're generally pretty expensive and quite hard to get hold of. There are a few out there, but that's that's really the age that you're seeing. And I first tried Bladnoch as an independent bottling, and I think it was might have been a signatory, or I think it was perhaps a Cadenhead's bottling. It was quite a while ago, the first and probably the only time I'd had it, and it was in a whiskey bar where they had a good IB selection. But I've started selling casks now back to third parties since 2018, because it's a real kind of contentious point. I think some distillers are like, we sell nothing to third parties, or basically the only way that you can get it from our distilleries, guys like Macallan or all of William Grant's distilleries kind of take this approach that you're not seeing a lot of independently bottled Macallan. When you do, it's things like Macallan Spey malt out of Corbin Vale. And then others, like for example, the distilleries of Diageo are pretty open, and they sell a great deal of their whiskey to third parties. And I really embrace independent bottlers as a great way for people to discover our distillery. I think that much like the blends versus single malts debate, I don't think it's a fair thing to say that independent bottlers do it better than OBs. But I think it's a great way for for real whiskey aficionados to rediscover the distillery. And so I've been selling a lot of casks to independent bottlers. I work with a lot of them directly, and you want to make sure that they look after the brand and the product. But you will start to see some whiskey distilled at Bladnoch. And we actually have a lighter spirit that we produce that we sell to third parties as well, which is a little like the story of Springbank making Kilkerran and Longrow. We have a lighter spirit that we sell to third parties. It's a real classic light grassy Lowland. So that's going to be an exciting way for new people to discover Bladnoch in the future, is through independent bottlers. So.
Interesting. I also wanted to go back to that question, of course, as well. So if you were to recommend someone where to start in Bladnoch, because personally, I probably recommend the 10 just because I like it so much. But if someone said, where should I start? Where would you say?
Look, I think 10-year-old is a good option, but unfortunately, because we discontinued it in early last year, it's getting very, very hard to find. And I've had people complaining to me that it's expensive at this particular shop, and I'm sort of, it's been discontinued. It's going to be, they're going to put the price up. We don't have any left. I mean, we literally don't have any stock to sell. It's all gone out to our distributors. So, look, 10, if you can find it, is a definitely good place to start. But it is 100% with its both feet in the path of distillation. So I guess it depends. Do you want to see where Bladnoch's come from, or do you want to see where it's going to? Because in that case, Vinaya is the whiskey to see what the future of Bladnoch's all about. But if you want to get an appreciation of where we've come from, I think 10 is an excellent whiskey that, it's getting a little harder to get. So the 11, which John's reviewed, and it's always quite funny that, his reviews like, oh gosh, the 11 is it's different in some way to the 10. And the first release of 11 that we did, and I don't have a bottle near me, but was with red wine. We did a first release where we kind of experimented, and we did a small run. Most of it went to Australia, a little bit was in the UK. But the subsequent to that, of the releases of 11-year-old, is just bourbon casks. And it's from the same batch of bourbon casks that 10-year-old is from. So the whiskey's distilled the same, it's from the same batch of casks. I mean, obviously they're different casks, but actual casks that went into the 10, that is making that whiskey. So even if 10's run out, you can buy the 2021 edition 11-year-old, and it's still bourbon cask. But you're right, it's got extra years on it, and that is going to, of course, make a bit of a difference to it. We have so few casks remaining is that globally we'll only produce 3,000 cases, which sounds like a lot, but then you remember that I ship to 45 different countries. 3,000 cases per year will be produced in 11-year-old, and that's our top produced aged whiskey. So that is one, if you can get you can't get the 10, you can get the 11 for that sort of step into our age stuff. But yeah, like I say, the future of Bladnoch are things like Vinaya that you've got there.
I don't think I've tried the 11, so now I'm very curious about it. I'll have to find a bottle for myself.
I know you like the 17. Well, did you try the 17? I think I watched a review that you did of our red wine cask 17-year-old.
Yeah,
was
I think
really
so.
good as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. The red wine, because I think Bladnoch has, or at least for me, I see it as very full-bodied and like very, it's almost like it feels thicker than some other in consistency and texture. And I think the red wine kind of holds up really well against it. So yeah, definitely.
It's been popular, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the comments that I've had about sort of the mouthfeel of the whiskey as well. Is it's very viscous. It's it's mouth coating. Speaking of which, we do have some whiskey, so we should probably actually do a little bit of a tasting, as we did promise a tasting today. Obviously, Will, if you wanted to stick with the espresso, I understand, because I mean, I've been there.
Time for my little sample bottle of whiskey. Unfortunately, I haven't got any real Vinaya. Actual final bottle is only a little sample bottle because it only got finished bottling 2 weeks ago, or 2.5 weeks ago. Came back to the distillery midweek. The bottles have to sit there for 24 hours in quarantine because, you know, we're in the post-COVID world. And as soon as it was ready, we pretty much had our team like lining up ready to run at them. It was like one of those supermarket dashes where you've got 1 minute to like dash in and get all the things from the supermarket. It was like that in our warehouse. They ran and they were picking bottles and they were getting orders ready. And then we launched last Monday, and it's been, you know, massively popular. And so I haven't been, you know, I'm always last in the queue to get a bottle. So hopefully I'll get mine in the next week or two. But until then, I have to make do with my my production bench sample. That, as I say, it's now 20 to 7, so it's definitely whiskey drinking time. So.
I just have an image now of like somebody dashing into a supermarket and coming out with 2 bottles of Bladnoch and an inflatable banana. Because
that's my dream. Maybe not the banana, but.
I mean, since it is whiskey drinking time here in the UK as well as in Australia, it'd be lovely to hear if someone's drumming along, and perhaps if someone having a Bladnoch, to see what their favourite is.
Yeah, it would be nice.
A very good friend of mine who has he's a big fan of the breakfast whiskey, and he'll always post on Facebook because he'll make it. He's a wonderful cook, and he makes great breakfast. You know, not just egg on toast, but you know, amazing dishes of, you know, from out of Asia and things like that. And he'll make a breakfast and match it to a whiskey, and I'm like, yeah, that's the dream to just run off the morning cooking and drinking whiskey.
I'm quite tempted to try the whiskey porridge because I've seen a lot of people try that, and I'm like, maybe for lunch.
I've been tempted to go and to one of the Golden Spurtle competitions at some point. So, in case anyone was wondering what is the most Scottish thing out there, it is the annual porridge making competitions in Carsbridge. It's a thing. There's been some wild stuff come out of it. But anyway, to the whiskey. So we're both, I'll get this one out of the way now. We're both going in with different glassware. Some people might have an issue with that. It's like, oh, you're going to get different. Yes, tastings are broadly subjective anyway. Whenever I've done tasting with people, I've always said it's going to be from your own personal experience, you know. So I mean, if you've spent the last 20 years eating nothing but chicken nuggets, you might struggle.
I think that's
not going to have. Yeah.
Sounds like I've known a few people like that who just subsist on chicken nuggets.
Yeah. One must subsist on beige alone. But yeah. So what are we getting on
because every time I drink out of a tumbler, I get, you know, hate mail and comments and saying, I can't believe it. But we've got lovely Bladnoch tumblers. I don't have any in front of me at the moment, but I love the drinking tumbler. If I'm actually drinking to enjoy, I like a nice sort of short, stocky tumbler. You know, occasionally I put ice in there. I had a very funny conversation, actually. I was in Scotland at the pub across the road from Bladnoch, where I'll always go for a drink at the end of the day when I'm working at the distillery. And sitting there, and they're always a bit bemused by a bunch of Australians coming over and, you know, doing whiskey making. And the bemusement started as sort of maybe mild hostility, and now after all these years, they've kind of upgraded it to just, you know, not quite fully understanding what I'm going on about. And I had a whiskey, and I wanted a bit of ice in it, and it was in summer, and so it was, you know, a balmy 21 degrees or something, and add a little bit of ice in the whiskey. And I mean, honestly, the barman looked like I just asked if I could shoot his mother. And he said, you know, you absolutely you can't. And of course, you know, I've got my Bladnoch shirt on, and, you know, it's a Bladnoch. And he goes, you cannot put whiskey in ice. The only thing that goes with whiskey is more whiskey. And I like that, but especially because I sell whiskey. And he says, you know, Scotch should be drunk at room temperature only. And I said, buddy, where I live in the summer, room temperature can be 45 degrees Celsius. So if we pop a whiskey on the boiler for a couple of minutes and heat it up, it's easy to enjoy it so much. So I don't know. I'm a big fan of drinking it how you like. I don't know if I'll openly drink whiskey and ice again at Bladnoch, or they might bloody suffocate me in my sleep for crimes against whiskey. But I'm a fan of a bit of ice in a whiskey if I'm drinking to enjoy it. But, you know, we've obviously got the little Glen cans as well that we they're very, very popular. It's probably one of our most popular things we sell at the shop. Is, you know, people love a branded glass. So I've got about 50 different brands of Glen cans. There's they're not a matching set, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, from all my time working in pubs, I mean, they are a very popular glass. They're the most popularly stolen glass that we will ever have. One of the pubs I worked in, they were like, "Oh, we'll have an idea. We'll put like our name on them and we'll charge for them." We lost a lot of money on that one because they all just disappeared. So anyway, so to the whiskey. So what were we all getting on the nose? Because obviously myself and Mo had sort of different thoughts on this initially when we both did our independent reviews. So I'm curious to see if we kind of meet in the middle a little bit, or
have we said what the casks are for it?
Oh, actually, yes, that's the point. We should do the cask makeup, shouldn't we? Thank you, Mo. That's a good thing one of us is a professional. So I think I was right when I was reading up on it. There was a article by, I think it was Scottish Field magazine. I'm not quite 100% certain. Yeah. They were saying that this is one of the first Bladnoch, if not the first Bladnoch release that does both ex-bourbon and ex-sherry casks.
That's right. So the 14-year-old, which was the kind of spiritual successor to the very popular 15-year-old, is 100% Oloroso first fill. This 14-year-old is exceptional. I absolutely love this. When I was at Bladnoch, I used to love, when I was at Pernod Ricard, I used to love and still do the Aberlour whiskies, especially the Abuna, the cask strength. It's quite a young cask strength, but it's all first fill sherry, and it's this massive 60% punchy sherry. And when I started at Bladnoch, I really loved the 15-year-old, for the big sherry flavors. And then now I'm really enjoying this 14. But someone, and a few people have made comments, and I get it. It's not very Lowland, big punchy, bold sherry flavors, and there's that big kind of Christmas cake. It's not really. When people think Bladnoch or even think Lowland's whiskey, they're looking for something that's lighter, sweeter, floral, grassier, and that big punchy, juicy sherry is it's quite discordant with people's expectations of the whiskey. So I mean, these things like 14 and 15 really limited releases, and they're an exploration of what we can do in our casks. But in the case of Vinaya, we wanted to both bring out the spirit character, but also give it enough bulk and body to carry it as a good quality whiskey. We didn't want it to be so light and thin and spirituous that people kind of wrote it off as being kind of underdone. So the sherry here really balances the bourbon cask, and this whiskey has, of course, casks of different ages. It's got some from recent times of production, and some from of these casks that we inherited with the distillery. It's the first time we've brought together bourbon and sherry cask. We've got bourbon and red wine in the Samsara, and we've got several sherry cask whiskies. But this is a nice combo that. There was a lot of backwards and forwards, and of course, shipping samples backwards and forwards across from Australia for David and the team to try it versus when Nick's producing different makeups. So it took a lot of extensive testing to get the balance right, to make sure that spirit really shines through. But as I say, you've still got enough of that influence of the sherry that it's still part of the tasting experience. I wouldn't call this a sherry bomb by any sense of the word. There's no kind of overwhelming Oloroso finish like you get into the 14.
Okay. I've been noticing this obviously whilst I've been chatting. I'm getting more kind of like a sort of a hay and grass kind of an influence than I was the first time that I tried this. Obviously, as you let a whiskey develop in the you give it a bit of air and stuff. There are going to be notes that come out from that, but maybe didn't pick up first, because I remember when I was doing the tasting of this initially, it was sort of overwhelmingly vanilla for me. That was kind of like my overall take of it. And then obviously I watched Moa's feedback, and I was like, maybe I was just having an off day. I don't know, but yeah, because my tasting notes were a little bit monotone on that particular day. But this time around, I'm getting more of kind of like a kind of like straw hay, kind of like dry grass sort of aromas.
One of the funny things about sorry,
No, I was just going to say I agree. But for me, and this only makes sense in my head, it has like a purple grassy hay notes. I think it's kind of a juicy kind of plum fruitiness that it's coming from. I think when you say one thing, it's so tricky when you say one thing on the nose, because I think there's so many things going on, but it's kind of difficult to peel them back because they kind of entwine really well with each other.
Yeah.
One of the things I really laughed at John, and you're a kindred spirit with Nick, is that Nick's a real sweet tooth, and actually so is David. To be honest, so am I. And one of the things I always talk about with Nick is, he comes up with the tasting notes. One of the things that he does is on the side of every bottle, we always choose. It's on the maybe it's on the tasting notes on the back. Yeah, on the side we always choose 3 kind of key tasting words. So for this one, it's fruitcake, dark chocolate, and sweet cinnamon, right? And there's always a battle because Nick has almost invariably, all his tasting notes are obscure British sweets. And I'm like, you can't send a tasting note to Israel saying it tastes of Parma violets because nobody knows what that sweet tastes like. And he said, "Oh, what are you talking about? It's well known." I said, "Definitely not." And he's always like throwing out different sweets, and sometimes they sort of squeeze through, and we're like, "Yeah, okay, that's understandable enough for an international audience to understand." But he's always throwing out different sweets, and I think on your review, John, you gave some. Well, I would say obscure, but you tell these stories about these sweets from your childhood and that's what I love about it. And Moa, you've grown up in a different country. I've grown up in New Zealand, and we've got these memory triggers that come from scent. And sometimes you get people either go, "Yes, I exactly know what you mean," or they look at you like you're crazy, going, "What are you talking about? That's not a real thing." So, I think it's so personal with these flavors. But I love what unites, I think, a lot of Bladnoch tasting notes is a lot of that sweetness to it, and people try and place it with a memory from their childhood about something which has got, whether it's a kind of a spicy light sweetness or floral or I think I can't recall the name of the sweet that you mentioned in your review, John, but it was something that you said you had from your 20 years ago or something. This particular was a biscuit, perhaps, but.
I always see my sweet exploration here in the UK as research for whiskey tasting notes, because I, for such a long time, had no clue what Parma violets was. And Cody's like, "We got to get you some so you can try it." And now sometimes I feel very, very fancy when I know I'm like, "Oh, a little bit like Parma violets, this one."
Well, I Googled it and I'm like, "That's a flower." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "No, it's a candy." And I'm like, "Oh."
I thought it was a flower as well.
Yeah, it's a violet flavored chalk, for want of a better way of putting it. Really, it doesn't sound appealing, and a lot of people aren't into it. Kind of like licorice all sorts. It's got its own little fan base. The sweet that it reminded me of was, and I kind of tried to look them up. I have a very distinctive memory of having tried them, but the internet's kind of like, I don't think these ever existed. I managed to find like a blurry picture of one wrapper of it, but it was jelly and ice cream flavored fruit pastilles. They were like a limited edition in the year 2000 for like 6 weeks. And I remember them quite distinctly because it was just like a vanilla flavored fruit pastel, and they were really nice.
Did you say obscure, Bill? Because I kind of agree.
Yeah. I mean, is that obscure?
I mean, possibly even obscure for the UK. I mean, he might have dreamt it. It might even be a real thing. Just like
that's what I was thinking. Maybe
you've ever seen that? There's an episode of a cartoon called Rick and Morty that my nephews like, and there's a scene in that where he remembers some McDonald's dipping sauce, and all of a sudden, old packets of this old dipping sauce were on eBay for thousands of dollars. So possibly you might be starting a run on strawberry jelly fruit pastels that now are reselling on eBay because John's building the hype about this discontinued candy. So
maybe compare them with Bladnoch.
You want to invest in old fruit pastels.
But I mean, if we want to make it a little more approachable, a note I did just get whilst we were talking as well. The red wine gum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. Is this with colors? Because I don't know. Some people think in colors a lot, and especially with candies. And I know some people are like, they all taste the same. And I'm like, a firm believer that they do not.
No.
You're saying like a red jelly bean or a green jelly bean. It's just color. It just tastes the same.
Yeah, no, they're different. They're all so different.
I'm sure Jelly Belly would be like, "How dare you?"
I think that what this really shows, and people asked earlier about what do I get into, what's the whiskey get me into Bladnoch. This really is so spirit forward. One of the products you can actually buy that I recommend that you do because it's something very interesting for a whiskey collector, is our new make spirit. And I won't say it's unusual. Sorry, I'm going to try and get it out of the light there. It's not like it's unusual. I mean, a few people sell their new make. We made this as a distillery exclusive. You had to buy from the shop. But of course, once we couldn't open the shop, we started selling it online. This has surprised me about just how popular it is that people want to taste straight from the stills, new make spirit. And because it's Bladnoch, and as Moa said, we really love our bottles. It's in a beautiful kind of square, heavy square 500ml bottle that evokes the bigger Bladnoch bottle. But we released this as a bit of a curiosity. When you come and do the tour, you get to taste Bladnoch, you taste our blended whiskey, Pure Scott, and you taste some of this. And people are asking, can I buy it? And because I'm a commercial guy, I said, you absolutely can buy it. Just wait here. But quickly develop this product. And it has been massively popular. We're exporting it all around the world, Germany, Taiwan, Italy. Everyone's buying new make spirit to try it because they want to really understand, where the whiskies come from. And if you taste some of that, or you put your nose in that and you taste the Vinaya, you're seeing the evolution of the whiskey that's coming from the stills. And understanding that while, of course, casks make a massive influence, and, Vinaya isn't coloured, it's not chill filtered, it's, as it comes out of the cask, and you can tell there's whiskey and bourbon casks have had an impact. The spirit shines through, and that lowland, light, grassy florality, and it gets the sweetness as well that you guys are tasting. It really is spirit driven, and it's the Bladnoch that I think is the most true to the spirit that we're producing today.
How would you describe the spirit if you could only maybe sum it up with 3 words for you?
Oh gosh, well, I can tell you the ones that Nick put on it because it puts his job in. He's put creamy, fresh and creamy, pear drops and fresh cut grass. I would say pear drops for sure, which I believe is another candy. You can tell Nick Savage wrote this note. But yeah, it's apples and pears. It's citrus but not lemon. It's definitely that kind of apple and pear type citrus. The fresh cut grass is a real classic Bladnoch character, and it's definitely in there. But and cereal is all new make. It's got a real cereal nose to it. But I think that it's that green apple, that Granny Smith apple that I really taste in the new make, and that again shines through into this final whiskey.
Because there is a real fascination with new makes, particular at the minute. Because I think a lot of people kind of want to sort of almost track the journey of their whiskey. So if they've got a glass of a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 15-year-old or something, and they've got new make, they're right. This is how it's all started. What's the cask done to it? And a lot of people really start fascinating over kind of like what different maturations do. We were talking as well a little bit about kind of like the notes that we're getting off of the new make, and it translates into the whiskey that we've got here. Obviously, both myself and Moa couldn't wait any longer, and I don't think either of us would blame the other. But I'm curious to see what notes we're getting now that we've had a few days to kind of like get to know the spirit a bit more, because it's developed a bit more for me. It's getting a little more fruit forward.
Yeah, same for me. And that sweet cinnamon, I think, is coming out as a sweeter style cinnamon instead of, at first I got it as more of a kind of a dry wood cinnamon, but now it's with that fruitiness probably coming out more as like a sweet cinnamon. Almost like when you have a sweet cinnamon, or like you do cinnamon sugar on apples. That kind of stuff.
Mm. One of your notes you gave for the 17-year-olds reminds me of the pastry that you have in Sweden, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Is it called kanelbulle?
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really loved this, and I looked up a recipe, and I made them actually when I got back home. I really like this the cinnamon bun that is obviously very famous in Sweden, and I like that note. So I told the team about that one, about your note of the cinnamon bun, but I definitely picked that up myself as soon as you, and that's the other thing, we're very suggestive. You say all these things and you put your nose, I'm like, oh yeah, now I really get it. Now I can't drink 17 without thinking of this kanelbulle Swedish cinnamon bun flavor. So like I say, it's really a journey that reminds you of the flavors.
I mean, it's a great pairing as well. Just a nice drama whiskey with the kanelbulle.
Excellent. I feel like that's a breakfast. Kanelbulle is a perfect thing that I'm going to get at the moment. So yeah, I haven't got the energy, I think, to make them, but I think I might head to the bakery this morning and pick something similar up.
Go for it.
So, I mean, I guess a couple of other things about this one is there's a real temptation when making a whiskey like this to chill filter, cut it, and color it. And certainly David and Nick and I were really aligned on that, although there was an initial discussion going, look, we need to get this whiskey. First of all, we need to get the price down. Like, that is a big thing. There's very, very few casks of old Bladnoch out there, and we just need to maintain them at a price that means that, the offtake of Bladnoch is at a maintainable level, so that there's still Bladnoch, aged Bladnochs to go in years to come. And I know, John, you've grumbled a bit about it being too expensive, and I sort of, when I write my comments in the YouTube replies, I'm always saying, look, you're right, it is expensive. We realize that, but there's not a lot of it, and we need it at a reasonable rate. Look, if I could make it £25, I would all day long, but unfortunately, it would sell it one day, and there'd be none left for anyone else, or it would sell and be constantly out of stock, and really, really frustrating to people. If we need to sort of do it at a reasonable rate. So one thing about Vinaya is we really wanted to make sure that it was, we're never going to be cheap, but it was relatively affordable. So we wanted it under £50. And one of the ways that you can do that, of course, is you cut the alcohol content. The UK is very taxed. France is very taxed. Australia has the highest tax on alcohol in the world. So in a bottle of Bladnoch, for example, we're paying around £20 of tax on any bottle. Doesn't matter what the value is. In the UK, it's about 10, or you've got VAT as well, so it's about 12 or 13. So it's still pretty high. But really, it didn't make sense for us to do all this great work introducing people to things like the 10 and the 11-year-old and to then cut the alcohol content. So we've kept it to 46.7. We've kept it non-chill filtered. We've still kept it natural color. And we've kept it as at £50 is about, I think, the sort of the limit. It's a product that, as I say, we've got unconstrained supply, and as we grow and can sell more of it, we're going to see it in more places. It's not just going to be at a couple of specialist whiskey shops, but it's a product that we'll be able to get a bit more widely available, so that you'll be able to get it down at your local, as opposed to having to order it online or head to temples of whiskey collectors like Royal Mile or Masters of Malt. Someone mentioned that Masters of Malt were out of stock. I know. I've already emailed last night to our distributor saying sort that out, and Whiskey Exchange are out of stock. So if anyone buys of Whiskey Exchange, they're out of stock of all Bladnochs, and they just haven't made an order for a while. So contact the Whiskey Exchange and say, I love Bladnoch and I want to get it back in stock, and I'll make another order. But you can always buy it on our website. But obviously the guys at Whiskey Exchange and Masters of Malt, they can do some pretty sharp deals as well because of the size of their operation. So.
I actually had a question about that. Chris from my Patreon was asking about the US distribution, how that looks, because obviously when you are very limited, it's not easy to have a wide distribution of things, and especially when you're trying to be in as many countries as possible. But yeah, he was asking because I know he likes it, but it's difficult to get a hold of, which I mean, it's one of those issues when you like something and you want to get a hold of it. Of course you do, but maybe a lot of other people do as well.
Sure. So the US is a very tricky one. It's not really a one country. It's 50 different ones when it comes to distributing alcohol. They've each got different tax and availability. Some states you have to buy from the state liquor store. Some of them you have to buy at certain registered stores. Some of them you can buy it at the petrol station on the corner. You can pick up a bottle of spirit. So they really vary in terms of how we get to the consumer. We're growing a lot in the US, and things like Vinaya are really going to continue to help us grow in the US because of the availability. Our major markets in the US are California. We're just getting into New York. We've got a great distributor in Seattle and Washington. Texas, we've got good availability there. The best thing is to get in touch with us and let us know where you are, and we can point you in the right direction. But one of the things you can do is if you go to bladnoch.com, and I got a little shameless plug here, and you click that you're from the US, you can actually order our products online via our website. And because the US is a funny system, we don't actually ship it to you. We process the order with the particular retailer in your state, and then it ships you the bottle. Americans aren't used to buying alcohol online, so it's not really that busy a site for us. Logically, here in the UK or here in Australia and in the UK, if you want to buy something, you just go online and buy it. But they just are not used to it. And if you're in a market where there's lots of complicated rules on alcohol buying, you're much more likely to go to your local liquor store than just jump online and buy online like we do. So we're trying to change that a little bit and to say head to our site, and you can obviously buy all the current Bladnochs. Vinaya's not yet in the US. It'll be coming in April. but you can get 10, 15, 17, and 25-year-old are sold on our website. So.
That's very interesting. I had no idea that it was such different kind of way of buying your spirit in the US to the UK. Because when I buy something, I usually just look online and get it there.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, there's a charm in getting into a shop and buying a bottle, I guess, but it just seems more
You've obviously never been in Minnesota in December. It's not so charming trudging out in the -20 to the liquor store when you want to get it delivered.
That's fair.
I mean, again, though, Edinburgh. But,
true, and Sweden, to be honest, you know about it. But well, actually, Sweden's the worst. I mean, what am I talking about in terms of buying alcohol? The Systembolaget is very challenging. So we have Bladnoch at the Systembolaget. Only the 10-year-old and the little occasional drops of the 17 you can get in Sweden through the Systembolaget. And we're in Alko as well, and we're in what's the other one? What's the Finnish one? We're in the Norwegian, Swedish, and the Finnish stores.
Yeah, that's well done. I mean, getting anything into that is tricky.
Yeah, it is tough, especially when it's limited and it's very, very expensive. So I do feel for you if you're sort of stuck in terms of availability. But Canada's the other one. Ontario, we're really trying to get into Toronto because it's the biggest single whiskey buyer in the world is the LCBO, the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. And because there's only one buyer for the whole province, one place you can buy alcohol of any kind, including if you're a bar. If you're a bar, you have to buy it from the liquor store. There's no distributors or wholesalers. So what that means is that you get in or you're out. And we're really trying hard because we have a lot of people from Canada keen to get in. We're in Alberta and in British Columbia, but not yet in Ontario. So any North American Bladnoch lovers, the best way is ask the store. Because if you ask the store, it goes back to the distributor and then they contact us. And so we can kind of, if we're knocking on the door going, hey, look at our wonderful whiskeys, they're like, yeah, people aren't going to buy it. But if people are asking them, saying, how do I get hold of it? It always makes it much harder. So much easier, sorry.
Yeah. It's always the way you want to go, really, isn't it? It's kind of like, drum up the interest first and then go, hey, there's this thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Grand. Right.
I'm only nosing my whiskey. I don't know if I have a little sip. I can't go into that without having a. It's after 7 now. So.
Yeah, don't want to go too crazy with it, but
I mean, you can already see my cheeks going a little bit red because that's what they do as soon as I touch whiskey. But I'm just going to bed after this, so I don't have to work all day. But it's definitely those fruits coming out, I think, and there's something in it I just can't pinpoint. Some sort of woodiness. But it's a little bit foreign in a way.
Okay. I've been thinking of red apples, a bit more vanilla, obviously, because I seem to be very sensitive to vanilla for some reason. I don't know. I don't think I eat whole vanilla pods on a daily basis, but apparently I just pick up a lot of vanilla on things. But a fair bit of like red apples, pears as well in there as well. So it's getting a bit more kind of like fruity than the first time than when I tried it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm just having a lovely evening at the moment.
Well, that's the best thing to do with whiskey. I think a lot of people take whiskey very, very seriously, but it is still whiskey. It's still something you should enjoy. I think that when the pursuit takes over the enjoyment, you've lost the reason that we make whiskey is for people to enjoy it. So I've had some amazing tasting notes in my time, as I'm sure a lot of people have. I remember, I was at a whiskey show and someone drinking it, and they were really sticking their nose into it, and I feel like it was not their first dram of the day, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, it smells like the first few moments of dawn across the fields of Scotland with the sound." I mean, they proposed a little picture about someone playing the bagpipes and things like that. And look, I love that it transported them to another place, but I would struggle to either put that on a tasting note or replicate that experience. It was very personal, but. As I say, probably not his first dram, but he was transported to this imaginary place by the whiskey, which I thought he was having a lot of fun with it. But he was very serious about it, and he was almost whisked away by this dram of whiskey. So that's a lot of fun. So it doesn't just have to be fruits and flavors; it can be emotions as well.
Yeah, definitely, or colors. I mean, my taste notes, sometimes I say them, and I'm like, oh, that was something I said and no one's going to understand. That's brilliant. But yeah, it's lovely to hear people's thoughts and just what they think about when they try whiskey, or something that brings people together. I think that's just a wonderful aspect of the liquid.
Just going through a couple of comments from earlier on. This was something that caught my eye, actually. No Bladnoch on, but on the 80s prior to the Lowland malt blend, which might have some Bladnoch in it. It's not something.
Have a look, and I can tell you. I can.
I thought, you know, there's a man.
I can like an informed guess. The Bladnoch is in a lot of blends. Anything for any kind of really dominant Lowland blends from the 70s and 80s, especially the 80s, is very likely to have some Bladnoch in there, because it was really what it was for. I think you've got a very good chance of that one having a bit of Bladnoch in there. Yeah, it's a Gordon MacPhail product. So Gordon MacPhail are some of the ones who do some independent bottlings of Bladnoch, and they're also buying casks as well. So look out for some future independent bottlings of Bladnoch from Gordon MacPhail as well. So
I do recognise. I'll go through a couple of these. Lowland's been far too long. Nothing wrong with going against grain. I'm just trying to sort of fire through a few of these as well. Massive Bladnoch fan. I'm glad to see another general no-age statement whiskey release. Vinaya is an excellent addition to their range. So I've actually had somebody who's had a chance to try it already.
I would hazard a guess that's Liam Cook. He's an industrial designer, and I know pretty much everyone who's bought a Vinaya. I mean, there's hundreds, but I look at every single order, and I'm pretty sure that's Liam. So if that's Liam Cook, hello. If it's not Liam Cook, then I'm sorry I've got your name wrong, and get in touch and become one of our fans that we keep in touch with. But I just know because he put up a review of it, and we appreciate everyone giving us their honest feedback. So.
Be sure to say hi, Liam. Palm Vowels is basically edible perfume, which I think we can agree with. I'm not sure what it says about myself that I quite enjoy that about them, but people enjoy Thrills gum that tastes like soap, so nothing surprises me anymore. I think we're just getting a lot of comments on Palm Vowels. They're very divisive sweets, those ones. Just adding the 14-year-old to my Bladnoch collection of the 26-year-old port pipes, the new Vinaya, and the Samsara, which was my intro to Bladnoch. So quite a collection there as well, actually.
26-year-old port pipe. I think they mean 25-year-old port pipe. We haven't done a 26 port. We've done a 26 red wine, but the 25-year-old port pipe is super rare now. That's one that you definitely don't get. We released it in 2017, and it kind of sold out almost straight away. Only maybe 100 cases, 600 bottles, and that's gone. So if you've got a port pipe Talia, that's a rare one. I don't even have any left in my collection, so. I foolishly sold it and now regret it. But
thank you for keeping at 46.7 ABV. Looking forward to Vinaya in Northeast US.
We've just got a new New Jersey distributor in the last couple of months, so Vinaya will definitely be coming to New Jersey.
I've just got Bob in there. Can confirm as a former Minnesota resident.
Yeah, it's a pain. It's a pain. But actually, again, just the reason I said Minnesota is we had a bar get in touch, and they've got over 2,000 bottles of single malt on their back bar, and they said we'd love to add Bladnoch to it, and so that's actually kickstarted the discussion with a Minnesota distributor. So a big shout out to Matchstick Bar in Minnesota. If you're ever in the, I don't think it's in St. Paul. I think it's just outside, but they've got a 2,000 single malt bar, and they want to add Bladnoch, and so thanks to them, we're going to be bringing Bladnoch to Minnesota.
Fantastic. And we have confirmation. You were correct.
It's like the Will could guess that easily. Like I say, I'm very obsessive about personal touch to the customers, and like sometimes it is a bit scary. And I have alerts set up anytime someone mentions Bladnoch. We want to be part of that conversation, because for 30 years, Bladnoch was a part of no conversations about whiskey. And so we're trying to really reverse that. And we try and get to know everybody, because I think it's good for, it's good for people to be able to talk to the brand and ask questions. And if you send us an email or an Instagram message or a Facebook, it's one of us. There's only three of us that work. So a big shout out to Alex and Rachel, who hopefully are awake by now on the team here in Australia. We're the ones that are collecting your messages. We don't outsource it to some marketing company or a robot or whatever that people are using. There are just the three of us, 24 hours a day, pretty much, collecting messages and responding. And we really do care about each of these messages. So we do appreciate all the times people get in touch with us.
I mean, I've got to agree with Liam as well. That is scary. Just take a moment to look at how little information is available. We have a name and nothing else.
Not even a picture.
Not even a picture. We've got a forename and that's it.
It's like if you bought a bottle, then will know who you are.
Exactly.
Isn't it? It's like if ever you buy one, he knows what he's kind of like the Bladnoch Santa.
I think we set a record. Someone ordered a bottle and they live in Wigton, and they got it, I think, in 3 hours and 40 minutes of them ordering that at the store.
Wow.
Which is pretty good for a small Lowland store. Look, he did live a mile up the road. It helps.
Well, yes. Yeah. I've had some luck with orders with like Edinburgh-based companies where they've said, it'll be there today no matter what. And actually, I had one point, it was a gin company, and the head distiller actually hand delivered it to me at my work. Because I was like, well, you might have to leave it with the neighbour. It's like, where do you work? Came into my work and went, there's your parcel. And I was like,
pretty good.
Okay then. It was amazing, but at the same time, I was like, this is strange. Great. I'll have to check them out when I go home. Right. So
someone asked about which bourbon company was the choice for barrels from James. So that was a good question. Look, we buy through a broker. We don't always use the same bourbon barrels. And to be honest, if they're of a good quality, then it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. So yeah, we buy from a broker, of course, out of Kentucky. Seen a lot of Wild Turkey going through there recently, some Heaven Hill, a few things from Sazerac Company, so it's like Buffalo Trace. Someone once asked, could you make a whiskey that was matured in like an ex-Pappy Van Winkle barrel or something like that? Well, first of all, those barrels are pretty knackered after 20 plus years with a single whiskey in there. And the other thing is that you probably wouldn't be able to get one really. But there really isn't going to be a huge amount of difference in terms of the finishing, apart from the sort of the bragging rights to have a super rare, super expensive bourbon. And what we're looking for is consistency, good quality wood, making sure that it's even and well seasoned, so that it ages the whiskey well, rather than particular brands. Something that people ask a lot actually is, can you tell us what brands of bourbon you're using? But it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. And as I say, it's generally a mix of bourbon. Unless you own a bourbon distillery like the guys at Beam Suntory, where they've got a pretty steady supply of ex-bourbon barrels to make Laphroaig, then it's generally always a mixture.
Is there a big difference when you buy cask through a whiskey broker, say, in price depending on the age of the barrel, or is there a difference that you can see that if it's from a specific distillery, it tends to be more expensive, or is it generally not a big difference?
There's generally, we're price takers, meaning that basically the market sets the price for bourbon barrels, and they're almost a commodity type product. The ones from the special bourbons, the very rare ones, are kept back by the distillers for their own use, I suppose. Obviously, you can't reuse it for bourbon, but no, for the supply of bourbon barrels, because there's so many, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of barrels make their way from the US to Scotland every year. There's not much stratification in terms of like, this is a grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. They're generally all pretty good, and they're generally relatively young bourbons. I mean, that's what you want. You want plenty of that vanilla. You don't want the cask to be too knackered or ossified. It needs to be heaps of nice fresh, relatively fresh lignin in there. 3 to 5 year olds is a good age for using a bourbon barrel.
Okay. Nice. Grand. Seeing as we're kind of getting into sort of a questiony mood anyway, I'm going to actually throw open with sort of the Q&A session, I suppose. So we did have a couple of questions come in with this. You probably heard me opening a video over audio. I apologize for that. But, it was to get one of the questions that I had submitted earlier on. And apparently when you hit pause, YouTube's like, oh, you want me to play? Okay, cool. So I've actually got a question in from Keith from a couple of days ago. So he just said that David Pryor, being the first Australian to own a Scottish distillery, must be keenly aware of the surging success of Australian distilleries like Starwood. One of the notable features of Australian whisky is its use of ex-wine casks from the Barossa Valley region. I'm wondering two things. One, is Will aware of whether or not Bladnoch has any intention of leaning on David's possible connection in Australia to provide some interesting ex-Australian cask finishes for Bladnoch? And two, is there any talk of opening a sister distillery in Australia to bridge the gap?
Great question. So, yeah, good question. There's a lot to it. I had actually already read the question on one of your YouTube videos because I didn't want to kind of get surprised by anything. So first thing is about ex-Australian red wine casks. So right now we fill into a lot of Californian ex-red wine. And actually, funnily enough, we have a great relationship with Samsara Winery, which is in Santa Barbara County, a couple of hours north of Los Angeles. It's a great winemaking region. If you've ever seen the movie Sideways with Paul Giamatti, that's the region that they make a lot of wine from. And up there in I won't pronounce it right, but San Luis Obispo. And so we get a lot of wine barrels from there, and of course up in Napa Valley as well. We don't really do so much of the European wine barrels, which a few guys like Denizen does, and Ben Romick does a lot of, Bordeaux cask, and I've even seen Sauterne and so forth. That we're not really getting a lot from there, so we do get from California. Australia is definitely an interesting one. If you follow our Instagram account, another shameless plug here, you may spot a few barrels with a provenance not far from me, and there are a few projects going on to have a play around with some Australian cask finishes, but it's a very long way to send a barrel. It makes it very, very expensive, and it's not the most efficient way to be sourcing casks. But we do have a few projects on the go using some Australian, not just wine, but also fortified. Australia makes some good fortified wine, kind of in the style of port or sherry, and we're using quite a range of casks to play around. In terms of opening a distillery, Keith, if you want to tip in the startup capital to get us going on Australia, we'll be happy to talk. But right now we're pretty busy running Bladnoch, and a lot of our friends at the distilleries here in Australia are doing a fantastic job between the famous ones like Lark and Sullivan's Cove and Starwood. Some of the less famous ones also doing a fantastic job. Big shout out to our good friend Dan Woolley down at Highwayman Whiskey. He's making his own whiskey and independent bottling, and actually, I've got to check out this bottle. This is one of my favourite Australian whiskies at the moment. This is not an open one. This is Highwayman Whiskey, and this is a ex-Tawny bottle, ex-Tawny cask of Australian whiskey, and it's powerful stuff. 55.5% ABV. You can tell. Dan used to be the national brand ambassador for Beam Suntory, so all peated whiskies. And I think so. He's a big freak, and he does limited drops of 200 bottles of this lovely whiskey. And I haven't opened my bottle, but I've drank some of somebody else's, and it comes from a cool bag. And he's doing marvelous things. He's a real character as well. He's got whiskey tattooed across his knuckles, which is always someone who's dedicated to the cause of whiskey. So Australia's whiskey industry is really full of great creators like that. So we'd rather work with them rather than to try and do it ourselves. So.
Okay, all right. I hadn't actually heard of the Highwayman whiskey before, so that's a new one on me.
Tiny. Nothing's exported. It's all very, very small batch. You've got to. I mean, generally they sell out in like 1 to 2 minutes the whole round when they get dropped. So you've got to be quick, but. That's part of the fun of it, I suppose. And I've been down to his distillery. It's about 2 hours from where I live, and I drive down, and it's a one-man operation. It's just a room full of casks, and he's running around with a Valanche going, "Oh, try this and try this and try this." Definitely don't drive to the distillery. You need a taxi on the way.
Sort of the Australian Daphne, I suppose.
Yeah.
What's it the fortified Australian wine is called? Is that Apera or something like that?
So they used to call it sherry and port, and then I think the WTO got involved, and you even used to be able to get champagne here that was not champagne. And there's a number of GI, geographic indication marks that were, it was I think 4 or 5 years ago. So now sherry is called Apera, port is called Tawny, Tokai is called Topake. And I think that's the ones I know off the top of my head. And so, basically, you have this like secret code about what a tawny is, and it's made exactly the same way as a port, but it's just called tawny. But of course, it's confusing because tawny is a type of port, but not all tawnies are made in the tawny style. But anyway,
so you can have a ruby.
Person who came up with it. Yeah, ruby tawny. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Not confusing at all.
Right, we've got another question here from Andrew. I noticed it earlier on. Oh, actually, no, we've covered that one already.
I think we answered that one, yeah.
Yes. Did we do this one already as well?
Oh, it's Nicola. As a friend of mine.
So
annoying.
you know them as well, Moa. See, we've all got friends on the stream.
Is it true that when the distillery was sold in '94, it was under the condition it never produces whiskey again?
So I think we touched on this in the history, and that when the Armstrong brothers bought the distillery from United, I mean, it was pre the word Diageo existing, but it was Diageo. It was with the intention to turn it into a holiday park. You know, it didn't have an intention to make whiskey, and there was a bit of a battle for them to get that permission because, yeah, it was under the condition that it was. They didn't sell it as a working distillery; they sold it as an ex-distillery that was a tourist attraction, a place to go and see. So it took them a few years to get that condition lifted, which, as I say, they did in 2000. So actually, this one here is one of the earliest casks. This was distilled in December 2000, and this one that I showed you, the Boilermaker House. This was one of the first casks filled since that condition was lifted. So I'm bringing some of this back to the UK actually. So we'll be able to buy that Moscatel one from our visitor centre. So highly recommend you come and visit. So.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that were very jealous of your Bladnoch collection, Will.
Yeah. I mean, I'm certainly one of them, if nothing else.
Well, actually, there's a few people that so one of the funny things, actually, and again, I'll do a plug, but it's not for something that I run, is one of the most, encouraging things for us that we're on the right track with bringing Bladnoch back is someone got in touch with us, a guy called John Anderson, and he's a massive fan of Bladnoch, and he said, I want to start a unofficial fan club for Bladnoch. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. So he started a Facebook group, the Bladnoch Distillery Unofficial Fan Club, and I think we're up to nearly 300 members now. And so, I mean, we participate in it, but it's all run purely by fans. You know, no one who works at the distillery as an admin, and people just share their Bladnoch collections, tell stories. We give them in return like a bit of an update on new stuff coming out, and there's some really great chat, and it's actually building into a really lovely community, really positive. And so if you really are interested in Bladnoch, then you go and just look it up on Facebook, and you can join. I might drop a link in on the stream afterwards. And it's been a lot of fun, and that's how we're getting a lot of feedback. You know, what do you like? What don't you like? What would you like to see from Bladnoch? And we came up with this idea for the Lochmarbury cask, the one that people vote on. That kind of came from the group, and it's a great way that we've been really, even another way that we can connect to our fans in quite a casual way. And I mean, look, there's a non-trivial amount of memes being shared, but there's also a lot of whiskey chat that goes on, which is a lot of fun, and it's connected people. So now we've got people in Holland and France and Germany, and of course Australia and the UK and the US, all sharing, and people do bottle swaps and samples and things like that. And it's really a nice little community that we're building up. So that's been a lot of fun to be part of.
Lovely. Sounds like they're becoming an official fan club.
Well, it was very clearly unofficial, and despite the fact that they try very hard to get out of me what the new stuff is.
Fair.
Oh, that sounds really gratifying, actually. Obviously, to be able to outreach to the people that love it, but also just kind of see how many people from all over the globe almost are reacting and really engaging with the whiskey as well. Yeah. Right, I do have a question here, and it's a bit of a cheeky one from Ed. I have a question for Will. What's your favourite whiskey from another distillery? Actually, I think we might have already accidentally tapped on one of them at least.
Yeah, look, I do really like that Highwayman, but I like the story. I like the person behind it, and I think that I'm a big fan of the stories. I think it's what makes whiskey so fun, is that there are so many unique stories. And what's my favorite whiskey? Look, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to say that if I'm not drinking Bladnoch, I'm probably drinking a very good quality bourbon. I am a big fan of the Colonel E.H. Taylor series of bourbons. Whenever I go to the US, I always try and grab something rare. I've got an 18-year marriage edition. I've got the Grains of the Gods, the Amaranth edition. Of course, I've got the select cask, the select barrel, the small batch and a single barrel. So I really do like good quality bourbons. I'm enjoying a Whistle Pig Old World Rye at the moment. I'm just looking at my non-Bladnoch shelf.
Such a yucky taste out of shots, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've carefully framed it so that I don't show. But so yeah, so normally it's probably American whiskey. I like, you know, something's well balanced. I'm not talking about your sort of your mass market stuff, but I really do like some of those special editions, and I always try and collect them. I'm fortunate in my job to get a lot of bottle shops, and sometimes I see these little treasures in the corner, and I'm some out of the way place in you know, in Arkansas, and I'll be like, yep, I'm going to grab a bottle of this rare whiskey, which, you know, something like E.H. Taylor sells for sort of $40 or $50 in the US, and if you can find it in Australia, it's $300. So it's one of those things that I do like to collect. So that would probably be. So I would say at the moment, yeah, probably E.H. Taylor single barrel. And then I'm jumping ahead to another question because I like it from James. Have I tried Starwood's ginger beer cask?
I've actually tried that one.
Is an expression.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Myself there. Starwood ginger beer cask.
Yeah, so we don't have the SWA here in Australia. You can do pretty much what the hell you like in terms of casks. Starwood have had a lot of fun. They did one cask that went on a cruise ship around the world. They've done all sorts of crazy stuff. So I think they call it New World Projects is the series where they did this ginger beer cask. And I've got a friend, or he's a Bladnoch fan, but he's now a friend called Zach, who is a mad Starwood collector. He's got a great Bladnoch collection, but he's also got all the Starwoods, and I've tried one with him. Look, I think it's pretty interesting. I think it's one step away from almost being flavored whiskey. You know, when you start to get some of those real sort of non-alcoholic finishes. I will tell you, if you wanted a weird cask finish, the Lark Distillery has just announced a Canotto cask whiskey. So Canotto is that bitter, dark, slightly herbal Italian soft drink. Do you guys know Canotto? Chinotto.
Oh yes, the San Pellegrino. It comes in like that horrid brown can
with a foil on the top. Yeah.
Yeah.
They are doing an ex Canotto cask. Now, I'm married to an Italian, and I've been to Italy many times, and I didn't know that it was ever aged in casks, to be honest. I thought it just came in the San Pellegrino can. But apparently there's a cask that they've soaked some Canotto in, and they're aging a whiskey in it. You know, has science gone too far? I don't know. I haven't tried the whiskey yet, but I was talking with a friend last night, and we were kind of, it's one of those ones you're like, oh gosh, a Canotto cask into your whiskey, that's a bit weird. And then by the end of the conversation, we're like, we definitely need to try this whiskey. So, you know, there really is no limit. And I know the SWA have loosened up the rules for us so that, you know, you can use tequila and mezcal and, you know, a lot of other products. But yeah, I think that the SWA might balk at some of the crazy experiments. But you know what? Australian whiskey isn't Scotch; it's Australian whiskey. You know, they don't have to follow the same rules. You know, why not be different? You know, we've still got some good rules. Has to be 2 years. Has to be old minimum. Has to be aged in Australia. You know, minimum 37%. We've got a lower ABV minimum, but there are still rules on it. And you know, be its own thing. You know, you don't have to just copy Scotch whiskey world. I mean, Japan's going through its own kind of you know, reckoning with you know, going out and being its own thing with its protection of its labeling rules, and that's going to be a, you know, big change for them. Australia's really going through it. James has somewhat cheekily suggested it'll next year we drop their dangleberries. So I'm clearly contacting us from the Starwood marketing department if he's coming up with such gems as drop it.
There was a couple of comments we just skipped over as well, so I'll just quickly pop those up. There's one more question's come through. Say hello to Jeff for the time that he can join us, obviously. And we've had one from Eugene. Is there anything Will can tell us about the future releases, both limited and core age terms? We've covered a fair bit of this already, so I suppose, you know, is there any particular one?
Yeah, so look, the core age statement is going to be all limited release. It's all going to be something which has the year in it. So like the 14, it'll say, you know, the year of it to kind of make it clear that this is a small run. So 11, 14, and are the two core age releases that we've put out so far. I was just about to reveal the next one, and I would have been getting a text from Rachel saying, I can't believe you revealed it. But there is one more core age statement that's coming. It was meant to come earlier in the year, but, you know, a few small challenges in the form of COVID plus Brexit has meant that we've had to push back the bottling a little bit. Is going to be coming out in the next couple of months, which is older than the 14. And so that's one to look out for, is one more core age stamen. And then on top of that, of course, we've got the Samsara and the Vinaya in the classic collection. And we are, again, later in the year, looking at one more classic collection, completely different to those other two. So that'll kind of form the core. And then we do our special releases, things like our select cask collaborations, our single cask series, which releases every year, which is a set of 5 single casks selected by Nick with a lovely white label. And this one is probably coming out in May or June this year. I haven't got the final release date. So this is a set of 5 casks that are chosen. Nick's already chosen all 25. And so for 5 years, we'll release 5 single casks. So one of the other things that we really wanted to do is kind of give everyone a really clear roadmap of where it's coming, so that it doesn't appear just like we're randomly releasing whiskey here and there and kind of making it up as we go along. Even if that's the reality, we want to at least give the impression that we've got a good, strong 5-year plan. So these are very nice. This one's actually my favorite of that. Last year's selections was a Manzanilla hogshead, and this was a really lovely addition. So
I remember sorry, on you go, Mo.
No, I was just going to say, it's always so interesting to see what the next one's going to be. I heard a little bird whispered in my ear about the peated stuff coming, the very limited one. And it's just, every time I hear, oh, there's a new Bladnoch, I'm like, oh, what is it? I feel like you only feel like that with certain brands, but Bladnoch's certainly one of them that's like, what is this cask going to be? Even though there's casks that you've heard of course, because there are limits within Scotch whisky. There's always something that makes you really intrigued by them.
The last thing we want is we release a whiskey and people roll their eyes and go, oh, here's another cynical ploy to just squeeze more money out of the punter. And look, we've had a few accusations leveled at us by people currently on this live stream that we're pushing our prices up and that, it's getting expensive. And I don't want to put you on the spot, John. He's sticking out of frame. But,
no, you have
it's not just, that we want to rinse people, but, we need things at every price point, but we also want to make sure that innovation really is something that's interesting and it's innovative, and we want to be proud of what we put out. And it's not just, we don't just slap a nice new label on it and, push it out and think, oh, well, suckers will buy it. And because we're so connected to the consumers, they'll tell us immediately if we do that. And they do, and they're not backward and coming forward. So we've made our bed of being really open to feedback and to our consumers. Now we have to lie in it and we have to listen to it. And even when Ralphie didn't like our 15-year-old, I could have just ignored it and said, oh, well, let's just pretend that we don't get bad reviews. But instead, I'd rather openly have that conversation and say, look, give us your feedback. We're not necessarily going to agree. Of course, we like the whiskey we put out. But at the end of the day, it's whiskey. It's a personal thing. It's subjective. Let's engage with people and talk to them and get their feedback. Ralphie doesn't love the tops, the metal tops we put in our premium whiskeys. And some people absolutely love them. And who's right? Well, it doesn't really matter. If you're going to buy the whiskey, then because you love it, then you're right. And if you don't buy it because you don't like the top, well, you're also right. So it's sort of a pointless argument to have whether we should put very nice bottles and really nice closures on our whiskey. 5 years ago, when we first launched, or 4 years ago, then there was a lot of heat. We released some products. One of them I got a lot of heat about is this one, which is our bicentennial release, 29-year-olds. You can see that I've been dramming at that one on special occasions. So this one in this lovely kind of leather box, and it's a gold-plated bottle. It's quite a beautiful whiskey, and at 5,000 pounds, it definitely raised a few eyebrows when we were doing that. But this is the oldest cask of Bladnoch that we had in the distillery when it was purchased. And so it really is a piece of history. And for 200 years, we bottled it on the 200th anniversary of the distillery founding. There are 200 bottles. Each one is hand engraved and numbered and signed. We've almost sold all of it now. I think the last of it was on its way to the US. We've just launched it in the last kind of month or two. So, and some people are like, gosh, it's a big fancy bottle and it's very expensive. And it is expensive and it's a big fancy bottle, but it appeals to someone who's a collector and loves the history and, has that money to spend on whiskey. And, who's anyone to begrudge anyone else on the choice that they make in their whiskey? So, but we've also got Vinaya at £50 with which is also very, very good. As long as what we're making is good quality, and there's something for everyone at a range of price points, then I don't know. Sometimes that feedback about all your whiskey should be £20, a 17-year-old whiskey should be £20, and only available to me and my friends is sort of not a sustainable commercial strategy.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a lot of the times you find a lot of different groups of whiskey drinkers that also think that they are the only type of whiskey drinker. And I have the very kind of pleasant situation where I'm standing, that I have one foot in this kind of whiskey enthusiast world, but also one foot in the beginner's world. And I think it can be really intimidating for a beginner to get into this kind of whiskey enthusiast world, because there's so much knowledge and there's so many people are so passionate about it. And being able to appeal to both of these groups is really tricky, because for one group, if you bottle below 46, they won't even consider it. But for the other group, if you bottle over 40, they will think it's super strong. So like you say, it's always going to be one of those things that everyone has their personal opinion. That's why it's really interesting. And I think there's, enough whiskey for everyone to have a favorite. But I think it is very interesting to see Bladnoch appeal to a lot of different categories, being so kind of versatile, being with the ABV, with the different cast releases. It's kind of, I think it's very, very important that you do care about your customers and show it really well. And I just think there's a lot to win from that, just caring about customers and listening to them. And then they are honest, but they're also quite loyal. So it's nice to see, and it will be very interesting to follow, I think, from my perspective, in that kind of both worlds kind of standpoint.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky, and it is a double-edged sword, because you appeal too much to the whiskey geeks, and I mean that in the most sort of nicest possible way, but also not sort of shutting people out. And I do find that the whiskey world can be quite exclusive, and not in the way that it's on the side of every box, but in a way that it likes to exclude people, and it defines itself by there's a lot of gatekeepers. Are you good enough to drink whiskey? And I hate that, and that we're really anti that in Australia, and we're much more everybody should be invited to like whiskey, and if you haven't fallen in love with whiskey, you just haven't worked out the right way to drink it, or you haven't found the right one. And but there is a bit of that, but I think it's changing, honestly. I think 5-10 years ago there was lots of very, very intense discussion groups and things like that, but social media stuff like this, online tastings, it's really opening it up to people. There's still a little bit of that snobbery kind of thing, and they're never going to like Bladnoch because we sort of go against the grain, but that's fine. There's other whiskies for them. But you're right. It's over the last 4 or 5 years, especially since I've been at Bladnoch, I've really noticed it changing from, it's a fancy bottle, and it's you shouldn't be doing this, and you should be doing this. Lots of people telling you how they should do it. None of them actually go out and board a distillery and try to bring it back to life. So everyone's very, very easy on the free advice. But that's really changed, and now we've really got people on that journey because we really are quite directly engaged with them. So.
Okay. I had a couple more comments come in as well, so I'll just quickly go over those.
I've got one special one to show you as well off that comment.
Oh,
okay. I don't know if you would have seen before. Sorry, I know that I'm bringing out some non-Bladnoch products, but
no, it's fascinating. It's always fun to see what people have at home, I think.
A lark that's finished in sparkling wine casks.
Interesting.
Ooh, also that bottle.
Yeah, it looks lovely. I've been trying to get hold of them.
It's sort of quite a. It looks like a little sort of tasting glass of whiskey, and then it's this really unusual shape. So
Joel,
this is I haven't opened this one yet, but I've had someone else's. Interesting. I mean, sparkling wine, again, a bit like Canotto, it's not something that you normally think of as being cask aged. And champagne is a very small amount of champagne that's still cask aged compared to tank matures. But there's innovation they're coming out with. So I guess you could probably do sparkling wine in Scotland. I think with the new SWA rules, you'd be okay. But not one that I've tried yet. I bet you guys have ever tried a champagne aged whiskey.
I think Glenfiddich did something similar. I know they've done it in Sweden, but it's always tricky to get around it. Yeah.
Oh, the Grand Cru, the Grand Cru 23-year-old.
I think so.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that when I was working with it, because we were just kind of like, do you want it in a you want it in a nosing glass or do you want it in a champagne coupe? And 9 people out of 10 were like, I'll have it in a coupe, please.
That would have been me. That would have been me.
Yeah, and a few other people as well. Actually, everyone was there, kind of like, what champagne you're drinking? It's like Glenfiddich. I didn't know they did champagne. They don't. Yeah, they're good at being a bit of fun. Right, I'll rattle through a couple more of these because I understand that obviously, we're getting through. So obviously, Mo, you might want to head to bed, and obviously, Will, you want to get on with your day as well. So I'll rattle through these 2, and then I think we'll do closing comments. We'll talk about the giveaway details, and then we'll close up for the night, if that's okay with everybody. Right, so willing to pay a high price for good finishing and a decent new make whiskey. I do want to get.
Hey, James, we love customers like you. So.
Hip flask inspired design. That's becoming quite popular, actually. Hip flask sort of bottles. Kinindi did it fairly recently.
Yeah, they're ones.
Bottles. We'll give a shout out to this is a rum distillery, so not direct competition, but this is Wester in Glasgow. They started doing this kind of like hip flask kind of style, which I'm not gonna lie, I love how it looks. I like.
Obviously, a lot of these people have never worked in bars, because if you have, you'll know that that's a lot of real estate that you're looking for in the bar, which is like this, and so they invariably end up kind of like on an angle in the bar, and you can't see the front label. And
that's what I was going to ask. What is the worst possible shape for a bottle to have in a bar? Is it that, or is it
something that's short and very wide and things like that? There's a few tequilas that go, or very tall. There's a few tequilas that are like 2 foot tall, and you can't put them in the shelf, and then so they invariably end up on the corner of the bar. So it's not good for your positioning. So bottle designers are available for consult.
Actually, I mean, if we're going to go off of the most awkward bottle I've had to work with in recent history, it's got to be this classic. I mean,
Blanton's is the same sort of shape.
It's a Chambord,
yeah. I mean, I love Chambord, but good God.
I was just disappointed when they took off the little the crown off the top. What happened to that? And then they took off. There was like a decal that was made out of like kind of like a metal alloy, and then they took that metal alloy off, and then they put a sticker, and they took the crown off. And I'm like, gosh, talk about cost cutting and taking away what made Chambord so cool. Oh, he's got his vintage Chambord. The real
of course it does. Of course it does.
Yeah, there you go. That's Chambord in my mind. That's the original.
It's a lot cooler, I think, though.
It does.
It
looks royal.
Smaller, but yeah, exactly. I mean, it is plastic, but it looks cool.
Is that not what the Queen holds? When they're in the thing and she holds the staff and the little thing? Is that not?
Chambord? Yeah, it's probably just a bottle of Chambord on there and just a little tipple.
Yeah.
When there's too much tabloid gossip, she can just drink out of the Chambord.
That's how she gets through it.
Famously, the Queen Mother was a big fan of Dubonnet, actually. Dubonnet and gin, and had a cocktail. So she used to put away a substantial quantity of Dubonnet, apparently. So always loved their sort of fortified. We had Prince Charles, who, when he's in Scotland, is known as the Duke of Rothesay. He came into the opening of Bladnoch, which was a lot of fun back in 2019. And he loves going to whiskey distillery openings because he loves whiskey. And he had someone mentioned the port pipe, and that was the one I think that he had a good slug of the Talia with David, the owner, who did the opening. So the Royals have always got a good connection to whiskey making in Scotland.
They're quite famous drinkers as a general rule, the royal family, aren't they? I think it's the Queen gets through a fair bit of gin of a day. Mm. So maybe that's the elixir of long life. Who knows? Jim Morgan's the orb of state there. Right, grand. I think we've covered everyone's questions, and obviously, we've had a chance to revisit the whiskey as well. Just in case I haven't stated it, quite enjoying it. I don't know why I'm holding a Chambord bottle talking about that. People coming in, it was kind of like, was this a Chambord? What's going on here? It's been really fascinating to hear a lot about, obviously the history of Bladnoch, but also a lot of like what's going forward, and obviously a lot of the sort of community engagement that's going on with Bladnoch as well at the minute. I'm sorry I was mean about the price.
No, I wasn't going to let you get away with that. I'm more upset that you're spelling my name wrong, John.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, you know, you've got plenty on me now, so I mean, you know, if ever I say anything mean again, you can just go in the comments. It's like, what's my name? It's like, oh god, that's gonna happen at some point, isn't it? But yeah,
Give and take relationship.
this has been absolutely fascinating. I'm really enjoying the Vinaya, and I'm looking forward to actually trying the new make at some point, and some of these other things that are coming out. Do you want to quickly tell us a little bit about the giveaway that we're planning on doing as well, for the people that have been sticking around for our deets?
So we've obviously got an online store that's sort of been the replacement for our physical store. So when you come and visit Bladnoch, of course, we've got a great little shop, we've got a nice little cafe, and of course do the tours. And since April last year, we've been kind of moving everything online. We launched our e-commerce in April last year, sort of right when the pandemic was hitting. It was always a plan to do an online store, but we weren't quite ready for just how busy it's been. So we've got a great team there that runs the e-commerce in the UK. So what we would love to do for your viewers is to give everyone a code when they buy from our store, and we'll offer free shipping on absolutely everything. So it's a pretty good deal, whether it's a bottle of new make, which you can buy online, or a bottle of Italia. Everything's got free shipping on it with the code. And for everyone who uses the code in the next week to buy something online, will go in the draw to win a bottle of Vinaya signed by Nick Savage, our master distiller, with a couple of Bladnoch glasses. Like, I haven't decided yet whether they'll be these or the tumblers, in a beautiful gift box. So literally a one of one, because we've never done a signed bottle of Vinaya yet. So you will have the first one with your name on it, signed to you from the master distiller in a beautiful presentation box. So one person who uses that code to buy anything, and you can even buy the little Bladnoch glasses on our store, just use that code. And yeah, one person in the next week will draw, and we'll get John and Moa to draw it, so that I can be abrogated of any accusations of bias towards anybody who's been a regular buyer. So yeah, make sure you use that code. You can have free shipping on Vinaya or anything else, and yeah, someone will go in the draw to win a signed bottle of Vinaya, which is pretty fun. So, and you have to, John, do you want to confirm the code? I know we talked about this before, but I don't know if
yeah, so one of the good things about doing collaborative stuff like this is, you know, I've never been able to like decide what a discount code name is before, so it's kind of like, you know, the magic of marketing sort of a thing. So some options were thrown around, you know, do you call it John Drinks? And I was like, no, do you know what, we'll go with Momo, because some viewers are very aware, and probably heard him during the stream. That's the name of my cat, because obviously, why wouldn't you name the discount code after your pet?
And it's not John's nickname for me, in case anyone thought that.
Well, that's what I thought it was. I thought maybe it was your nickname, Moa, and
no, it's a cat. We don't know each other that well yet.
Hey. Yeah, so this is the source of the code for today. So I thought it's a bit of fun, isn't it? So
right.
You know, that's something you can talk about in a few years. It's like, oh yeah, we did a collaboration once, and we did a giveaway. But, all right, yeah, he named the discount after his cat. Weird guy.
And is that the MOMO?
MOMO, yeah.
Yep, MOMO.
I'm sure you put a link in underneath with it as well. So.
Yeah, so I'll pop it in the description for this stream, and I'll be passing it around as well on some socials as well, give everyone a chance to make the most of it, because I think a lot of people are going to be really fascinated to get their hands on some Bladnoch stuff now. So hopefully they can, if nothing else, make most of the free shipping with a chance to get some cool gear in there as well. But yeah, so I'm going to wrap this up for tonight. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much, both of you guys. So Moa, obviously, for staying up late, and Will for getting up early. Thank you so much for all the stories that you've told us and all the sort of intel, and Moa, all of your insights into the whiskey, and just your natural professionalism that's helped keep this weird train going for this. It's an absolute treat having you both for this. I'm going to say thank you very much as well to the audience that's joined us, and if anyone's joining us on the catch-up, thank you very much for giving this a watch again. Everyone, make sure that you check out the Bladnoch website, give them a follow on Facebook. And also, I'm going to check out that unofficial but kind of official, I guess, but not official fan club as well, because you've piqued my interest. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much to everybody. And we're going to call it a night. Thank you for joining, guys. And I'm going to stop saying thank you now and say good night or good morning as well.
Cheers.
Thank you.